Jedi business, go back to your drinks.
Welcome. Everybody is welcome. Thanks for joining again. Another episode of Jedi Business. Joining me once again is Darthzartan. Paulie.
Hey, how you doing, man?
Well, good now, except
Yeah. I hear
got a
you.
little technical difficulties getting this going. But anyways, we got a lot to get into. So I know it's been a while since we've been here, but just to start off today, we're here because of Andor season 2. They dropped 3 episodes, which is pretty crazy. Which I'm kind of glad they did. I really got into it with the 3 episodes.
I agree.
Yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
that to me, I think it's a good move. I mean, it does certainly because you're always looking forward to the next episode, but having 3 together like that, it's like a mini movie. But I heard different ideas, and we can talk about that as far as why they did it that way. But I don't mind it. I like it.
The first 3 episodes, we'll get into it. Before we do, me and you and of course Red 5 Chris and Kenny went to go see the 20th anniversary, if you can believe that, 20 years, 20th anniversary of Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith in the big screen. And
Right.
I gotta say, I really enjoyed it. You just sent me a message that it's the number 2 movie, which is crazy that
Yeah.
here we are in spring, blockbuster time, and a 20-year-old movie's, obviously it's not going to make $1 billion or something crazy, but for a re-release of a 20-year-old movie that many of us already own, that's still pretty good to come in number 2.
Well, I agree 100%. And I think, the message should be sent that, don't ever underestimate Star Wars fans for one. But I, I think the other part of that is, people were looking to, like always, trying to get away and what they may have are good memories, especially maybe that generation that grew up with it. I know a couple of us were talking on the way out. For us, our generation grew up with the original trilogy. Those kids in their late 30s and 40s right now, they grew up with this trilogy. And so for them, this is kind of a special experience on top of the fact you've got just Star Wars fans in general and people probably looking to get away. And some of the other stuff out there, I'm just thinking just isn't that appealing to people.
It'd be nice if something like this could bring us together, but once again, in the internet sphere, there still seems to be a battle between older fans and new fans. Today, I was just sitting there reading online, people going back and forth, some people criticizing the Andor show, and then other people saying, well, look, here you're getting more people going out to see. Because I'm enjoying Andor, but the truth is, the ratings aren't there.
Yeah,
It's not doing very well.
right.
And of course, the older, quote unquote, some of the older fans are sitting there saying, look, you got a 20-year-old movie that's doing basically better business than a current, supposedly greatest Star Wars show ever is doing right now, ratings wise. I don't know if you can equate those or anything, but
Well, I think what you can pull from it, and this has been through the course of history, certainly when you look at like a teenage, maybe even early 20s, but certainly teenage audience, or even certainly a child's audience, if they're going to see the movie for the first time on the big screen. People want something happening every couple minutes and they want something blowing up in their face, but what Andor does is as we discussed a little earlier when we watched the movie is, in my opinion, it does take us back to a little bit, it's an adult sort of theme show. I know we're going to get into that a little bit later, but it doesn't talk down to the audience, and it does get into politics. It does get into day to day life, and I think there's good reason for that. But I think what we're gonna see is there's always going to be that divide. You've got, especially with the introduction of social media and several other platforms over the last 20 years. If you look at the audience, I'm pretty confident that the numbers would skew a certain direction. Yeah, you're always going to find those kids that are literate and excited about maybe a deep thinking show, but that's what this is. And most people, I would say, especially those younger age groups, skew more towards just strictly action. And you get parts of that here, but it's just not going to be constant. And for the most part, I think the show holds up on a number of levels. It does take me back to the old days of Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back in terms of, if you think back to those movies, the themes were a little more serious, a little darker overtones. Granted, maybe not to this extent, but still, there was a tonal shift in Jedi when that came out. It was a little bit more lighthearted. Yeah, there were scenes intermixed and the underlying plot about Luke and Vader and all this, but it was different, especially when you introduce like the Ewoks. There's a comedic element to it. and not as much of that was present in the first two films. So this actually takes it one step farther. It's maybe it is only appreciated by an older audience, but it is what it is. But to your point, yeah, I'm sure the ratings are going to reflect that.
That is one thing you mentioned when Vader was being burned alive.
Yeah,
It's like, well, because we're going to get into the whole debate about whether. Spoiler alert, of course, if you're listening to this, obviously, I hope you've watched Andor already. If you haven't, go see that before you listen here, because we are going to do spoilers. But there's the big debate on there's the rape scene, quote unquote, the rape scene from episode 3 of Andor, and like you were saying, it's like, well, it's not like they didn't have murdering kids and burning bodies, and it wasn't like Star Wars was
right,
adult or brutal in the
right.
first place. But just to wrap up my thoughts of Sith, obviously that it is my favorite of the prequels, which is funny because it is my favorite of the prequels, but it's actually the one I watched least because it's just so emotional. I have a hard time. I mean, I love it when I watch it, but I even today when I was there, I had tears in my eyes in certain scenes. I mean, I can admit it. It's just frustrating, especially watching Clone Wars and the first two episodes, and how much Anakin and Obi-Wan and all that together. It's just, even now when I'm watching, I was like, I'm sitting there saying, "No, Anakin, what are you doing?" It's like, just go away with Padme. You just give it all up. Just go live it. Quit the order. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Right.
even now watching it, of course, I'm being silly in a certain way because obviously we know what's going to happen. But so it is
Well,
my
would you
favorite.
do it?
I actually put it sometimes. I put it above Jedi in my overall list
No.
of movies,
I,
and
well, I think because it is you do see the actual sort of progression of Anakin turning into Vader, and that's, I think, certainly something I wanted to see as a kid. Is okay. So who is this Vader guy? You wanted to know more about him, and I think this movie clearly, even though the prequels were really about him, this movie really hammers into certainly his fall and kind of what comes after. But I hear you.
but overall, just to wrap up, what are your thoughts on the movie, just the movie itself, and where it sits in the grand scheme of the Star Wars story, Episode 3?
Yeah, I think it's funny. Like you, I kind of bounce it back and forth between Jedi and Sith. As far as where that ranks, number 3 or 4. I think what 3 did a better job of is really advancing a larger storyline along. Jedi did what it, and again, I have a soft spot for it because the original trilogy is what I
Yep.
grew up with. But when you look at what it was able to do, it actually moved a big chunk of that plot along and filled in a lot of holes, throughout the course of the movie.
And for me, many times it's my third favorite, and there's a couple of scenes in there among my favorite of Star Wars altogether and of any movie. But that being said, let's move along. Andor, what did you think of the first 3 episodes overall?
Again, I thought overall well done. The only criticism I felt, and it seems to be consistent with other things I've seen online, is that second episode where he spends so much time with that. Basically, I guess it's a rebel faction that has a big fallout, right? And so
Yeah, yep, yep.
most of the episode they're
That's,
bickering,
that's
fighting.
one of my complaints too. But go ahead. I'm sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think they basically they call it something else, but it's Rochambeau, basically, right? Rock, paper, scissors. They're just doing a variation of that, and I mean, whatever, that's fine. But I mean, that whole sequence could have been shorter, and I get what they were trying to do, and we may see some of those people later, but it goes to kind of what Saw Gerrera was saying in season 1 when he and Luthen were talking, and he says, "Hey, we've got this faction, that faction." That's part of the problem with any resistance movement, especially in its youth. You just have a lot of splintered factions, a lot of people, and I know that's part of what they were trying to, I think, show. But it just felt like the storyline got bogged down with that whole sequence on that planet, I thought.
Exactly. I agree with you totally. I like the idea of the factions not knowing each other, of
Right.
them be him basically saying we're with the rebellion too, but well,
Yeah.
rebellion, you know what I'm saying? I
Right.
like that because that's how it usually happens with cells. But I just felt the same thing. They basically started off with Cassian, and he's basically waylaid for almost the whole until that whole second episode until he rescues at the end. Even most of the third episode he's kind of waylaid, and it
Right.
just kind of, I don't know, like you said, it just kind of bogged him down. It's like, because nothing really happened there. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? We got to see some certain things like about the factions, but like you said, that could have been done a lot quicker. And I don't know. It just I kind of was hoping he for a while there when he's starting to give orders like, hey, we need some rainwater or we should put a perimeter. I was kind of hoping he'd kind of take over and they'd see his worth, and you know what I'm saying, and maybe them realizing that hey, this isn't just some dumb imperial guy. This is a uh, someone we should maybe listen to. But they didn't go that route, so it just seemed kind of wasted. That whole uh, that whole incident and everything. But I mean, I liked it, but I just felt it went too long.
Well, that to me is a good example of why it was good to have 3 episodes. If I would have watched that one week and that would have been the only episode for the week, I would have felt kind of bummed out, right? So I'm at least by episode 3, The Harvest, that kind of picked it right back up, and then it all kind of was a little more seamless in terms of how everything flowed from the first through the third episode as opposed to just a standalone episode.
Did you feel they wasted with the Mon Mothma stuff? Too much with the wedding. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I should have rewatched season 1 because I forgot what's going on with her and that other guy that her daughter's husband's father and all that. Obviously, I remember she had some problems with money and stuff like that, but I
Right.
can't remember what was going on, and I'm gonna have to rewatch it because I'm missing all the subtleties. But I don't know, it
Well,
just seemed too much. They went too much with the.
Well, even with the 15-minute recap they have on Disney Plus, I mean, there are some subtle details that would probably be if you just. I think it was in 1 or 2 episodes towards the back half of the season 1. I think that would probably be sufficient. But if you watch that to cover those, but basically, in a nutshell, she goes to her old friend Tay, the guy who's basically smashed for most of the wedding, I guess.
Yeah, the
But
way her husband accuses her. Yeah,
right. Well, apparently they had a relationship when they were younger, and they knew each other when they were younger. I guess they've known each other for years. But she had gone to him in season 1 because she knew that she was going to need more than just her money to help finance the rebellion, right? So basically, because of, I guess he's having some issues with his wife, maybe some of these investments may or may not be picking up a little bit of heat from, because he kind of, so I was trying to figure that out because, he certainly was trying to punk her for money, right? He basically is saying, hey, this has been such a headache for me. I think I need to be compensated or else I might have to go squeal on you guys.
yeah, that's yeah.
So that's basically what he's saying. But was he also saying, was it legitimate that maybe, because he kind of put it on a spin on it, and I don't know if this was more of his angle, like he was trying to pull the wool over her eyes, or was he legitimately saying, yeah, it's that, but also, hey, I am actually getting, it's a little bit harder to make money here or to invest money here because they've got more eyes on stuff. So if both of those could be true, right? In other words, we know he's trying to sort of blackmail her, but at the same time, he's
Yeah.
also, right, there could be some legitimate concerns as far as funding. So that's the whole reason why, and why that guy kind of looks up to the father-in-law to be, is because he's kind of a, I guess for Chandrilla on that planet, I guess he's a big baller. Basically, he's got access to a lot of money. He's a pretty successful businessman, but the problem is I guess he's made a lot of that through illicit gains. He's basically kind of doing stuff in the dark. So maybe illegally, obviously. So I think that's why she was always hesitant. Oh gosh, I gotta get in bed, figuratively speaking, with this guy. So that's why I think there it's more, if you pay attention to all the little things that happened during the wedding or the sequence. Obviously, on one layer, it's kind of an expose of here. This is what Chandrilla culture looks like. Certainly, the elevated high culture, but I get the sense that it's kind of a well-to-do planet. But at the same time, it also kind of gives you a little sense into the history of the planet and the people. And as you see towards the end, and I can't claim to ever have watched and read and seen every single Star Wars thing because I never did the games really. There's been a number of different novels over the last 40 years, much less last 20 years. So why I bring all that up is I guess there was that artifact at the end that was brought back home that was sacked, I guess, many years ago or thousands of years ago. I'm not familiar with that group, but I guess that was sort of in legacy material or legends material, that was a group that was mentioned. So that apparently Rakatan, I guess, is the group. So that's kind of played into it. So they're kind of giving you an overlay, plus they're giving you a political kind of angle to it and some of the politics that are being played. And then there's a little bit of the character element with her and Tay, in terms of their past relationship. And now he's trying to basically punk her for money. And that's when Luthen says,
There's
oh,
so much going on, like side
well,
and everything. Even with what's his name's driver. I thought, oh wait a
exactly.
minute, is something is this going to be a hit, or is she spying on him? Just the
Oh,
way.
no, no, no. So that's exactly, remember. So if you read between the lines, to me, it's all very clear. So the driver, remember, was the gal that her and the Mothma's, her and Mon's cousin,
Yeah,
I
cousin or
believe.
whatever.
Yes,
Yeah,
they're lovers, right? Those two
right.
girls are lovers, basically. But she says, "Gee, I haven't seen her in a while," and then she pops up at the very end. Well, she's always, or at least in season one and now in season two, worked for Luthen. So the idea there is I wouldn't be seeing her. It's not just a friendly visit. She's obviously here on business. So basically, she's here to pick up Tay, and she's going to knock him off. So
Yeah.
because
You know what?
right,
I
otherwise,
didn't actually
yeah,
recognize her at first as the
yeah,
girlfriend. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? I didn't
yeah,
recognize it. And I was like, wait a minute, is that's
yeah.
her? And I was like, yeah, she could have knocked him off. Is that what she's doing?
And then of course there's the whole family relationship, and I think why we're going to see this as important. We got hints of it in Star Wars Rebels, kind of jump into a different series and it's animated, but still that all ties together, which is this is sort of the career and sort of the life path of Mon, right? Which is she's now, and that's what was in a sense so beautiful about what happened at the end. I mean, you could just see, I guess you could argue this happened in other points of time here in our reality, which is, people before it gets so bad and so far off, they're probably she's probably trying to make things work while she still supports the rebels. But I think between what happens in this episode and in future episodes and other media, I think what you're going to find is you're going to find she's basically going to flip the switch at some point and say, that's it. I'm done trying to play nice, which she does. I guess in Rebels, right? She has that one episode where she is the transport on the Ghost, and she's making a speech, and she's basically saying, everybody, the Emperor's a bad guy, basically, and we got to stand up against him. Well, what were the course of actions that happened in her life to get her to this point, right? So I think what you see here is basically she's realized, my God, what have I done? I've been tiptoeing along, doing all this back and forth between the Senate, trying to play the good, politician, and trying to foster this rebellion or resistance. And at the same time, now my daughter is now going to be lost to some crime lord and his kid, and for what? Just so I could have access to his money. And then at the same time, she knows her relationship's kind of up and down with her husband. And then more so, I think she sees, once Luthen, he made a real good comment. I don't know if you caught that, when she said something about, but basically, oh gosh, I didn't even think of that. Like, in other words, it was kind of out of her mind that Tay was that much of a liability. And he said, well, how nice for you. Basically, yeah, that's nice that you're playing in kiddie world, but it's time for you to grow up and realize you're going to have to make hard decisions. So, all this is kind of hitting her, and that's why I said the beautiful part at the end was she just let loose and just said, the hell with it. I'm done. I'm going to get smashed. I'm going to enjoy myself, or at least get away from all this for the night, right?
Yeah,
And then,
yeah, yeah. Well,
reality's hit.
one thing I mentioned earlier when we were at the movies, that if you get a chance, go back and watch them deleted scenes from Revenge of the Sith with
Right, right.
Mothma, because there's a scene where they're meeting with the senators, and basically they sign I can't remember for the life of me what was the Accord of the 19 or some crazy thing where they got together and they went to Palpatine to say, hey, like what uh, Padme was trying to get Anakin to do, where it's like, hey, stop the war, let's try to negotiate and blah, blah,
Right.
blah. And they actually have that scene in Padme's headquarters or apartment,
Yeah,
or with
yeah.
Mon Mothma and Bail Organa and a couple others, where they're talking about it, and then they actually go to Palpatine and he shuts them down. There's some good deleted scenes with Mon Mothma.
Yeah. I saw it, but gosh, it's been quite a few years. So when you mentioned it, I do remember it in my mind's eye, those scenes. I just don't remember all that. So I probably have to make time to go back and watch that
Yeah,
again.
yeah,
That's a
it's
good point.
cool. It's the same actress too.
Yeah. Well, someone, and that's been over 20 years ago. So I was actually impressed that someone decided, hey, we're going to cast her again, and they did a good job because I think, I forget her last name is Genevieve something, right? So
Yeah,
she's doing a heck of a job. I think she's one of the standout characters in the show right now.
yep. Um, so beyond that, what did you think about the other storyline? And of course, on the planet, the harvest and all that, and of course, the quote unquote rape scene that seems to be so controversial right now. Uh,
Right.
how did you think about that? How that all played out? To me, it just seemed. I mean, we've seen this before, and even the Bad Batch, where they're out there with certain people, and the Empire's coming, they're doing a survey or whatever it is. They got to get out of there. So that particular story, even on Rebels before, so that particular storyline wasn't new or clever, but that definitely was intense. I got to say, that
Well,
whole thing.
definitely. So, on a personal note, it hit me, but also visually, I think it accomplished what their goal was, which was to show this is what happens when there's an authoritarian ruler in place, right? And you get a situation where you see now over time, because this has been what, 12, 15 years, probably closer to 15 years after basically the empire's been in place, right? So
I think it's a 4 BBY, so yeah, 15 years.
yeah. So you see now the toll that it's taking on people, and something that really hasn't been mentioned much. I guess the rape thing is one, but if you want to talk politics, there was the whole, I don't know if you want to call it sublayer or additional storyline about immigration, right? And they're talking about these people, and you have to have visas, and you have to,
I saw
they were
that.
doing
We need
so
workers,
there's
but they're not.
there's yeah, no, they do it in a way which makes sense, and you can clearly see parallels with modern day. But that's why I say it was a personal note with, once the empire came in to do their audit. I can just think back now. I don't have firsthand stories, but I do know. I mean, my family, just so you know my history, I mean, I had family that were overseas, both in France and in the South Pacific during World War II. So they dealt with the Japanese and the Germans, and certainly I had a American side as well that were fighting overseas. But my point is there, what all the stuff that I see, and of course I grew up like all of us in our age group watching, what did we watch, either World War II or Vietnam movies, right, in terms of war movies and that stuff. So there's all these scenes of, and that's what hits you, and of course a lot, this is taken, certainly Lucas was influenced by history, and so you certainly know that the look, and this, to a certain point, the storyline is a lot of what happened up to and leading to World War II. And you see I mean, look at how the Empire is dressed, right? I mean, it's clearly influenced by
Yes,
by the Germans in World War II.
yes,
My
very
point
much.
is though is my point is though is you could have just, that whole sequence on that farming planet, or in that colony, I guess, was right. You could see that happen in old France, in France, like in 1938 or something like that, where, the Germans come in, they're basically being a bunch of bullies and thugs, and they're coming in like the one who ends up later getting killed by Bix. But, he says, hey, go ahead and feed my guys. Please hold two more servings for whatever. He's basically saying, hey, we run the show here. You do what I tell you to do. And I just think back to not just France, but probably Belgium and a number of other countries in Europe that were overtaken by the Nazis back then. It's like, they came in and they basically were running things. And when they said, hey, we're in control, I want to have your daughter, they didn't even ask for permission. They just went
Oh,
after people. So
yeah,
that's the kind of thing that was on a personal level that kind of hit me. But certainly growing up with a lot of different stuff that, watching those old movies, it just looked like it could have been a clip out of, hey, well, they're the Germans taking advantage of, local citizens. But,
exactly.
but that whole storyline, I think, was, again, it's one to tell the story of how, basically how bad that situation can be if you're subordinate to some sort of totalitarian or authoritarian government. And it obviously it's a pretty compelling story, right? People are going to watch because it's like, whoa, what is she going to do? Oh my gosh, this guy's such a creep. Well, it's part of telling a compelling story.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I really liked is the way they did it and showing it and like you said, referencing things that have happened in our history, but they did it without it just being so on the nose and like in your face. You know what I'm saying? It's like the
Right.
story's happening and you see this stuff happening in the background, and then you can sit there and think, hey, and that's what I think good storytelling is, rather than getting your message and sticking the message right in front of your face. Uh,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? It
Well, I
just
think,
it told its
yeah.
story without being heavy-handed, and yet in that sense, but it was intense. It was
Well, the best writing is not preachy. It's about basically putting cues out there, whether they're visual cues or storylines, and then telling a compelling story, and then letting the audience kind of figure it out for themselves. And I think
good
that's what works
sci-fi,
best.
man. Good
Yeah.
sci-fi, putting modern problems like what Star Trek in the '60s was able to do,
Right.
the race relations, putting modern issues, but not putting it in a way where you're not preachy, but it makes you think.
Right. That's right.
And another thing I caught, I don't, maybe I was wrong, but I don't know, did you caught when I forgot his name, but the guy, the team member of their group, the big guy who ends up
Oh,
dying.
Brasso.
Yeah,
Brasso.
when he's up there on the floor and he sees the guy who had been helping him,
Yes.
and he
Yes.
goes, "Oh, you turned us in," and then they have this
Right.
look. The guy didn't really turn him in. He just kind of did that to save, you know, uh,
Exactly. Him and
yeah,
his family.
yeah, to save him, and that's what he did. That's what he was doing, right? the,
Right. Right.
the
Well,
guy didn't really turn him in, because I was at first I was like, wait a minute, did he turn him in? Like, but then I saw that look. I was like, no, he's just they got
no.
that look between. I was like, hey, thanks.
You know that to me is good acting on both of those actors'
Hell
parts
yeah, that
because
was
because
great.
because he I thought the same thing at first. I'm like, well, what did I miss? And then I'm like, wait a second, he's doing it for a reason, right? He's just basically leading them in a false direction. Well,
Yeah,
it was just a subtle look, like
it
he raised his
was.
eyebrow, and I'm like, oh, I get it. That's all you need
Yeah.
to know, right?
Yeah, it was just that's what I'm saying. It's just a look. He looked, and then the guy had just this look on his face, and then it's like,
Right. Well,
oh, okay.
what are you talking about? I didn't turn you in, right? You
Yeah,
could
but
see
then
it.
it's like, oh, thank you. You could just feel it. It's like, thank you. You're basically
Right.
getting him off any kind of scent that he'd been helping him at all.
Exactly. Well, and it's too bad. I know there's a couple commenters that have said, "Oh, poor Brasso," but I think unfortunately he's going to be one of probably many that we're going to see die between now and the last episode, because we know that a number of these people don't make it to the original trilogy movies, much less Rogue One, and it wouldn't really be, I don't think, credible or believable if some of these people didn't die. Right? In other words, they're fighting a fight. They're literally shooting and, I mean, planning explosives and all this other business. People are going to die, and it's sad, but that's the reality. So I thought that was, hey, it again, people will have good memories of Brasso, but it just kind of helps move the plot along.
There is one other thing that I agree with you, is that I'm glad they put 3 episodes out, because you're right. Just thinking about what you just said a little while ago, that if we had just gotten that second episode by itself, it might have been disappointing. But the way it fit in, when okay, I got another episode, I can go right to it right now. It didn't bother me as much, even though I said it was a little complaint that it kind of waylaid Cassian too much off to the side.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, so I'm kind of glad. Did you say there's are they how are they releasing? Is there going to be 3 episodes again this week, or?
Yeah, it's so basically they've broken it into 4 weeks, 3 episodes each week. So it's basically four mini movies.
Okay, perfect. That's great. I like
Just
that.
and let's before we stop, I mean, what probably should mention, was that a pretty cool TIE fighter or what?
I thought that whole scene was great.
Yeah,
Of him stealing it and not knowing exactly how to steer it when he's
yeah,
busting out of the thing. I was like, and then when he's doing all that, I'm thinking, even before that, the whole scene and everything, I'm thinking, this is what the thought in my head was like, man, this is what I've always wanted. Just it reminded me of some good old when Battlestar Galactic was out. Just
right, right.
good sci-fi that's like not stupid, that can have comedy in it, but it's serious and there's serious stakes.
That's
Uh,
right.
so when I was watching, I was like, man, this is what it doesn't even have to be Star Wars, but this is what I want. Just and why can't they make good sci-fi like this? You know what I'm saying? Uh, but
It's
yeah, that Tie Fighter that Tie Fighter was pretty awesome, and I thought it was really good that okay, he's a pilot, but yeah, you're not gonna know every new ship.
no,
And I
no.
actually like that lady he was talking to. She did a pretty good job.
Yeah,
She was only there for a bit, but
the technician.
yeah, the technician, how she was a little worried, and he's telling her, you got to do what's right and blah blah. I thought that whole scene was really good, and
Well, it shows that he's kind of matured a little bit too. Remember in the first season, he was kind of reluctant. Hey, do I want to do this? And then he's like, yeah, I'm in. And then now you can see he's actually taking more of a leadership position, and he's trying to influence people and kind of remind them that this is kind of our goal. You're doing a good job. Keep it up. You know.
yeah, which will be interesting to we see what happens between now and then in the series because like you said, obviously season one he started extremely reluctant, basically didn't want to do it, to now where he's in a position of being really supportive and this is what we're doing, the rebellion. But if you remember the beginning of Rogue One, he seemed like disgusted with what he'd become, this killer,
Right.
and and what he'd done for the rebellion. And Jin kind of Jin Urso kind of reinstills the whole while we're doing it for a bigger reason and blah blah blah. So obviously he becomes disillusioned between now and the end of the series. Just how brutal he becomes and
Yeah. Well, and keep in mind, coming up probably in the next 3 episodes, if not, it'll probably be in the three after that is K2SO. He's going to be coming up, and Anthony Tudyk did such a great job, the actor that plays the voice, at least, so in the movie. So I'm looking forward to his introduction here coming up real quick too.
Also one other thing, the whole other third plot of the series. I can never remember her name, but her and the guy with his mother.
Oh, Dedra and Cyril.
Yeah, I didn't. I have to rewatch because I don't remember them being together.
Well,
And
if at the very end, I think it was either the last episode or the second to last. I think it was the last episode, right? She was kind of disgusted by him. She thought, "Oh, you're just a little weasel trying to get in my pants," basically. But
yeah, because he kept
which he was.
trying to tell
But
her something's happening, something's happening.
right. But remember, towards that last when they were on Rick's Road or whatever that road was, where Marva, the mom, his mom, Andor's mom, she had her hologram speech, and then they get into there's a big revolt there on the planet or in the street. Well, he saves her life. He actually, I think, either pushed her or pulls her into like a room in another building off to the side, and
Yeah, I don't remember that. I gotta rewatch
right.
it, bro.
So
I
so
remember that.
so certainly she felt very sort of thankful for that, but maybe she took a little bit more appreciation because the guy's not stupid, and I think a lot of people just thought this guy's an idiot. But you could certainly say he's a little overzealous, right? I mean, you saw that with the trainee that he had that day in I forget what episode it was, but he's like, oh, I've done this, and kind of like trying to tell the kid, I'm I'm top dog here. You got to do what I say, and this is what all the special things I've accomplished. Okay, whoop de doo. But the point is I think they're building them both up. She's obviously getting more influence within the ISB, and then he's getting a little more status within, the bureau that he works in. So, and obviously they've clicked up. And then I thought that was just hilarious in terms of how the mom is there, and then of course Dedrick does her thing and just lays down the law and says, "Hey,
Yeah.
right, as long as you're here, I'm the one that's running things." And it's like, oh, okay, so.
But not only that, then we got the whole subplot, which seemed a little bit lost with this whole uh, mining stuff that they're doing on this planet with
Oh,
spiders.
Gorman.
Do you think
Gorman.
that's going to come back to? Because basically, what they're saying is they're going to kill all these people. Or at the very least, all these people are expendable.
Well, I think what someone mentioned it, basically it's a false flag operation, as it sounds like what they're doing, which is basically like they're setting up something will probably happen, either a plague or, some kind of virus, or maybe they're just going to do an all out attack. But what they're going to do is they're going to put the blame on the rebels, right? They're going to say, oh gosh, the Empire was here trying to do our work, and these guys came in and did all this and killed all these people.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If this is going to,
yeah,
it's underneath, but it's going to come back as a major plot point later on.
Well, again, this has been mentioned, I guess, in several media. And again, I don't follow every single thing that's come out over the years, but apparently it was mentioned in another media about Gorman. And that was, and I guess, again, this was brought up later, I think, in Rebels or another thing that's come out over the years from Lucasfilm, or Disney. But this idea that basically this was one of those catalysts where, because of what happens there, that also drives people towards the rebellion, saying, "Hey,
Okay.
that's not right. We got to fight against that." So
You
it
know
is.
what? You know
Yeah.
what's crazy? I used to know there was like three major events that led toward the rebellion, but it's EU stuff. I knew all those old ones, but the newer ones that
Right.
they replaced. I
I
don't like
I
Gorm.
thought
I don't know those.
this is going back a ways, but I thought you were going to say, well, this was something that was in Starlog, or one of those old magazines, like, because
Yeah.
they'd come out with stuff, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is, sometimes it was like 2 years before something would go into production, so you didn't know how credible the information was, but sometimes there was a kernel of a good news there, but yeah, you're right, it's altogether different. It's some things have been changed. It looks like Filoni is actually trying to reincorporate some of that legend stuff you see Thrawn and some of that other stuff come in.
You know,
Uh,
it's funny. Speaking of Starlog, I gotta find this. Unless I lost it when I lost my storage unit,
oh,
I have a copy of Starlog before Return of the Jedi came out, and it says we have the story of Return of the Jedi, and of course you know how Empire ended with there is another. So according to the Starlog, and it's gonna sound bizarre me saying it, but my dad read it, so he remembers this too. So uh, basically, it opens up and Return of the Jedi opens up at a funeral for Yoda, and supposedly all the galaxy, well, all the rebellions there
yeah.
to which doesn't make sense because he's a you know most of the galaxy wouldn't even know him anymore.
Right, just a
But
Jedi.
anyways, yeah, the whole rebellion's there for his funeral, and supposedly there's an egg on his planet Dagobah that hatches, and in it is a creature called Adoy, which I later realized was Yoda spelled backwards, which was a purple creature with wings, and he
So
was quote unquote the other, and he helps Luke take down the Empire and blah blah blah. Anyways, it was bizarre, but
Well,
yeah,
no. I believe you, because no, trust me, I actually still have it somewhere. I've got magazines stashed in where I'm at in my office here. I mean, in other words, not hiding, just I got so much other stuff on top of it. I haven't gotten to it in probably 25 years, but it was a magazine. I don't know if it was like there were several different magazines at the time. I don't remember which one, but it had Sybil Danning. Do you remember Sybil Danning? She was like kind of a B, maybe even C actress, and she was kind of in like some, how would you call it? I don't even know if you could call it porn. It was like light version, like porn light or something, and just terrible movies. But anyhow, she she was on the front cover dressed in black leather, and they were saying, I think if I remember it correctly, like, this is going to be the new, I think her and Vader are going to get together, and she's going to,
yeah,
I'm like, what?
she was in that movie Chained Heat with
There you
Eric
go. There
Estrada.
you go. There you go. But I'm like, what? Even then as a kid, I'm like, I don't know about this, But I'm like, but none of that came to pass. But that's where you wonder: are these guys just? I mean,
Yeah,
were they getting bad information, or were they just trying to, kind of like before social media, were they just trying to start up a?
it was the internet before the internet, but
Exactly. That-
so people
Anyhow,
will go around saying, "Oh, you can't believe everything." Well, you couldn't always believe everything back then either, because this was Starlog, which was supposedly a reputable magazine.
right. And you have to imagine, right? I mean, we all know now. I mean, you see coverage of something, it's instantaneous. Well, back then, that's the stories were written, the stories were published like after a month, in some cases after information had already leaked out or come out. So it was dated by the time you got it, and
Yeah,
so that's
you
why
could, there was no way to verify it back then. Now you
that's it,
could do a Snope search or something like that.
something. Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, that's funny.
Well,
Anyways,
yeah, no, I think to your point though, I mean, I think we're going to be, there's still some surprises ahead of us in this show. And, with another 9 episodes, there's a lot of ground to cover, I think. But I guess, so that's the other thing. I don't know if we talked about this, but so this is BBY4, the next one
yeah.
is BBY3, et cetera, et cetera.
No, I didn't know that.
So
No.
each 3 episode story arc takes place more or less a year from the last one, in a year.
Are you sure about that? I mean,
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
read this? Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
I didn't know that.
that's why they started this one a year after the season one. So season one all took place in one year. or over the course of several months in 1 year. But then this 3 episode story arc was BBY4. The next one will be BBY3, then BBY2, BBY1, and then
Okay.
you'll go to Rogue One. Now he's even made the actor Diego Luna has even made comments. He says when you finish with this season, he said you should go see Rogue One again or watch it. It's gonna seem like a different film. So I don't know, probably because it gives you different context. Kind of a little bit more behind the scenes, I guess. What's going,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, just the same way that once you saw episode 3 and went back to see the original Star Wars, it definitely there was different connotations.
yeah, yeah, exactly,
You know.
exactly.
Anyways, yeah. One last thing. When did you say Underworld's coming out? Star Wars Underworld?
Right. So I was going to mention this too. So next Sunday, May the 4th, right? They're going to have kind of it's always been Star Wars Day, at least traditionally in the last decade or so. But they're going to air on Disney Plus. I think it's a 6 episodes of Star Wars Underworld.
Can't
That
wait for that. I seen the
right.
previews. I can't wait.
Right. So that's coming out. But then obviously in 2 days is the next, 3 story arc. So depending on when we do this next show or podcast, we may have both of those to talk about, or we may just have one to talk about. But I think either way, we're going to have plenty to talk about.
Yeah, or maybe we can slip in one between them, or that way we're
Right.
not all
Right.
packed up on one.
That
But
sounds
yeah.
good. That sounds good.
All right, Polly. Well, glad glad to talk to you. Had fun at the movies today. Next week, not only we got that, but man, we got Thunderbolts coming up.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
I'm excited for. I'm actually pretty excited.